Welcome to Gambling with an Edge with your hosts Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin. Bob Dancer is America's premier video poker writer and teacher. He's written 10 books, including Video Poker for the Intelligent Beginner and the best-selling $1 Million Video Poker. He helped develop the computer software Video Poker for Winners, and in 2004 he was inducted into the Video Poker Hall of Fame. Richard Munchkin has been a professional advantage player for over 30 years and is in the Blackjack Hall of Fame. His book, Gambling Wizards, Conversations with the World's Greatest Gamblers, is a testament to the many ways you can succeed at gambling. The goal of the show is that you'll be a more knowledgeable gambler tomorrow than you were yesterday. And now, here are Bob and Richard.
Good evening. Happy New Year. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Our guest tonight is Blackjack tournament specialist Ken Smith, and we'll be discussing 2 of his books, How to Win More Blackjack Tournaments, followed by How to Win Even More Blackjack Tournaments. We'll be talking to Ken in a few minutes. We received an email to gamblingwithanedge@gmail.com asking about how to play a particular video poker hand. Specifically, it was that question dealt with triple-double bonus, and when you're dealt a pair of aces along with a kicker and 2 other miscellaneous cards, do you hold the kicker with the aces or not? The simple answer is no, you don't. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that this is not the kind of question Richard and I are hoping to get from our readers, from our listeners. Now, how to play a specific hand is something that is easily looked up on computer software. Anyone who wishes to play video poker with an edge needs to have computer software, period. If you have a question like this, look it up. The software does you no good if you never look at it. And yes, there's a learning curve for each of the software products, and each one is different, but you need to go through that if it's going to be useful. Now, if the person who wrote to me had a question such as she had Video Poker for Winners and she didn't know how to look up a hand to ask, well then fine, that's something I can address. But it took her as much energy to send the email as it did to look this up. So, Richard, are there any questions you've gotten that made you scratch your head and wonder why people expect you to be that kind of an answer man?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Often I get questions that if they just typed it into Google, they would have the answer faster. So, yeah, I don't want to get questions like, when should I split sevens? But, yeah, I don't know. It just baffles me when people send those kind of questions. And I don't know about that particular game that you mentioned, but you don't even have to own the software for a lot of games. I mean, if you just Google it, you might find it on Mike Shackelford's site, Wizard of Odds.
You definitely will find it on the Wizard of Odds site, definitely.
So yeah, just use the Google. But yeah, we do encourage your questions. So
yeah, even if we slam them every now and then.
Right.
All right, Richard, why don't you tell us who Ken Smith is and why he's going to talk to us tonight?
Okay, well, Ken is a writer and a webmaster and an advantage player. So things that I have in common with him, I feel a kinship with him. He's written 2 books, as you mentioned, How to Win More Blackjack Tournaments and How to Win Even More Blackjack Tournaments. In addition, he just came out with some strategy cards for blackjack that we'll talk about those a little bit. But I'd actually like to start because he's been doing some research into online gambling, and so we'll start there. Ken Smith, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Hi, guys. Glad to be here tonight. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you. So I understand that you've just been in New Jersey delving into the online gambling there. So can you tell us what you've discovered?
Absolutely. Once the games actually went live in New Jersey, I decided to make a trip up there pretty early on to get some boots on the ground experience, as it were, and see what kinds of games were being offered, how the payment mechanisms were being implemented, and basically just how it's going to compare to what we saw with the offshore operators up until around 2006 when legal changes made that industry pretty much dry up. So I headed up and spent a few days in snowy New Jersey, basically camped out in a hotel room playing online. So I was about 5 miles from Atlantic City and never even bothered to go into Atlantic City. I was too busy doing my research. So I spent a few days in New Jersey, and I spent one day in Delaware. Delaware is another state that has actually authorized completely casino-style online gambling. My impressions were actually pretty favorable in New Jersey. I came away impressed with the products. I think the industry has a lot to look forward to up there. The quality of the games being offered is quite high. There are games with really low player edges to be found, much more so than I expected, in fact. I know that Richard has some experience in the online gambling world and has probably tried out some of the better quality software over the years in that realm, and the stuff I'm seeing up there is absolutely comparable to the best we've seen in the past. And
now, when I put it out that you were going to be the guest this week, and that this was going to be one of our topics, I did receive an email with questions about what back in the old days. Let me just back up for a second. Prior to 2006, when there was a lot of online gambling, we had NetTeller, and in the early days, PayPal. How do people get money in and out of these casinos?
Prior to my trip, I had been made aware that there were quite a few payment processing issues. There were people trying to deposit with credit cards that were being declined. So I went up fully assuming that I was likely to have problems, especially given that my billing address was going to be out of state. When I arrived in New Jersey, rather than trying the credit cards initially, I deposited using the ACH process, which is the automated clearinghouse method of withdrawing money from a linked bank account directly into the online casino. And frankly, that process went as smoothly as can be. I put in the account numbers, clicked submit, and it worked on the first try. I deposited at 3 different casinos in New Jersey with no problem at all. When I got to Delaware, I tried to do the same thing, and the transaction from my bank account was declined through a third-party processor that I guess is a fraud prevention outfit. And I don't know if it was because of the number of transactions in the course of a few days, or if it was just a problem in Delaware, but the transaction was declined. And at that point, I had to rely on credit cards to try to do a deposit in Delaware. And like most other people are reporting, I had a lot of trouble trying to get one of my credit cards to work. I had several cards issued by Chase Bank that were all declined. I had another MasterCard from another small bank issuer that was declined. And finally, I was successful using a Citibank card. No problems with it. It went through immediately. However, when I got home, and I was watching for this, when I got home, I learned that they were treating that deposit as a cash advance. And, of course, there were fees associated with that, and it was to begin accruing interest immediately. So as soon as I got home, as soon as the transaction had cleared, I immediately paid the balance in full to avoid any further charges. But it did cost me a cash advance fee.
Now, I also understand that in New Jersey, you can go in physically into a casino and deposit money in your account or get money out of your account in that way.
That is correct, and that's certainly for people who are unwilling to link it to their bank account directly, that would be an ideal method, because you can do both deposits and withdrawals at the cashier's cage in the affiliated casino. So that's certainly a good option. At this point, I would strongly recommend people use either that method or the ACH direct bank method, because obviously the credit cards are going to be an issue. This is all going to change. You mentioned the company NetTeller, which I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with if they did anything in the online poker world. There are similar services that are popping up to service this market in that regard. In fact, tomorrow I have an interview scheduled with the CEO of a company called Skrill. You may be familiar with it under its previous name, Money Bookers. And this is another e-wallet type solution that is approved in New Jersey to work with these online casino providers. And we should be seeing them starting to process transactions soon. I'm hopeful that that will eliminate some of the fee issues and be a better approach all around, more like what we had with NetTeller.
The casinos are already showing Skrill logos on their websites, so I assume that is coming soon. Now, in the old days when you had to pay fees, whether they were from a credit card or through Western Union, the casinos would refund those to you, but they're not doing that in New Jersey yet?
Well, I don't actually know. I didn't see any mention of that when I deposited in Delaware with my credit card. Certainly there was no indication that, hey, this might be treated as a cash advance or anything like that. And while I was in New Jersey, I was using ACH, and I knew there were not going to be fees associated with that, so I didn't worry about it. But I would assume that to be competitive, yes, if there are going to be fees incurred, then the casinos are pretty much going to be obligated to cover that for their customers just to remain competitive in the marketplace.
And have they started competing in terms of comps they're giving to the players? When
the casinos first came online, for whatever reason, the New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement issued an opinion about the use of what they're calling withdrawal restricted balances, and this is a concept that will be familiar to anyone who's played online. Very, very common marketing practice for online casinos is to offer a deposit match bonus. So if you put in $500, they may give you an additional $500 to play with. So your starting balance might be $1,000. But those funds must be wagered a certain number of times before they can be withdrawn. And the New Jersey Gaming has approved that idea, but they did put a restriction on it. They said the casinos could begin using that kind of a promotion only after the games had been up and running for 30 days, which I haven't looked at my calendar to see, but we're approaching that now. I'm assuming that we're going to start seeing much more aggressive acquisition bonuses for players, once that becomes the law. And we should be at that point right now. I'm starting to get a few offers now in my email for 25% match bonuses from the places that I deposited. So we are definitely going to see that kind of promotion going on, yes.
And
well, that's good to hear.
At least in video poker, there's NSU, which is 99.73 if you play it appropriately. So if you're getting any kind of a match play, if they're giving you any kind of bonus at all on what you deposit and you know how to play, then you're playing with an advantage.
Absolutely. I'm sure Richard is quite familiar with this bonus harvesting process where some of these deals are very lucrative. I mean, I know players who made substantial sums back in the heyday of the offshore casinos using these kinds of deposit bonuses. It was really a candy store.
Except back then.
I'm sorry. How many casinos are there? Online casinos are there in New Jersey, and how many in Delaware?
The New Jersey market, I think we have 7 of the casinos in Atlantic City are now offering one website or another for this. Each of them is approved to offer up to 5 different products online, and we haven't reached anywhere near that number at this point. But there are roughly 11, I think, online sites up and running now. In Delaware, the situation is quite a bit different. There are 3 online casinos. They are run by the racetrack casinos in the state, and they all use a common provider as the back end. They are all actually powered by a company called 888, and which is sort of sad. 888 also is in the New Jersey market. They are affiliated with Bally's in Atlantic City, and of the games that I looked at, 888 was by far the poorest offering available. So it's a shame that is the only game available in Delaware.
All right, let's start talking about your blackjack tournament books. You started playing tournaments in 94, which is about the same time I started video poker. Now, at that time, Stanford Wong's Casino's Tournament Strategy was considered the best guidebook on how to play blackjack and other tournaments.
Pretty much the only one.
How is the approach in your writings different from Wong's approach?
First, I have to commend Stanford Wong for Casino Tournament Strategy. As a book that was published in 1992, it has held up remarkably well. It is still the first thing I recommend that players read when they want to become a proficient tournament player. Although I may have quibbles here and there about a few of the things that have maybe not held up over the years, by and large, the thinking that he went through when he produced that is still very, very accurate, and it's a tremendous resource to this day. My books, Wong's book focuses not only on blackjack tournaments. He does cover several other varieties of casino game tournaments, whereas most of my writing is exclusively in blackjack tournament strategy. And basically, I go, really look at an in-depth approach to the game. Once you get some of the basic ideas of the game down pat, it really becomes a game of subtle variations here and there and ways you can really, increase your advantage in the final few hands. There are so many unusual situations that arise, and my books, critique some of those different situations and give you some really high-powered strategies that go kind of beyond what Wong did in his books.
How have the tournaments changed over the last 20 years?
Boy, I wish I had good news as far as the state of tournament blackjack today. We are seeing a pretty dismal situation right now with what's available out there. The absolute peak of popularity of these events was probably in the 2004 to 2005 area, something like that. We had some televised events on the Game Show Network. In fact, that's where I first met Richard. We were sitting across a televised table for the World Series of Blackjack. After that, we had the Ultimate Blackjack Tour, which obviously has got its own issues now in hindsight. And there were a lot of good, solid, open, not invitational entry fee events all around the country. At that time, I was traveling and playing many, many events. You could go pay an entry fee anywhere from $100 to $500, to play for very large prize pools in many different parts of the country. In the Midwest, along the Mississippi Gulf Coast, certainly in Las Vegas, almost all of that is gone. What we've seen is the very low end of the market, and I'm talking about small weekly tournaments with maybe a $20 entry fee and a $1,000 or $2,000 prize pool total. Those events still exist, and the very large invitational events still exist. And these are events where the casino is inviting their premium players in, giving them a free entry into a tournament, and usually the prize pools are quite large, $200,000-$300,000, not unusual. But the middle ground, where an average player can go just plunk down cash to enter an event, those are all but gone. There are only a handful of properties in the U.S. now that are even running events. So it's a pretty tough situation, frankly.
Speaking of those invitational tournaments, now, at least here in Las Vegas, so in addition to the usual problems that you have on how to play each hand in the tournament, the bigger problem is getting invited. And then if you do get invited, then it's getting invited to the next one. So do you have anything to say on that subject?
Well, I get asked this question a lot by email. People asking me, well, I see all these invitational tournaments listed on your Blackjack Tournament's website calendar. How do I get into these events? And the answer is fairly simple. The casino has some sort of criteria that they're using to decide which players to mail out an invitation to. It's going to be based strictly on your theoretical loss on your trips to the casino. So they're taking your average time at the table, your average bet, and determining how valuable you are as a customer. And once you reach that certain threshold that they deem is valuable enough to extend an invitation, you'll start getting those in the mail. And unfortunately, you mentioned, how do you stay invited for the next event? Well, your play on every one of those return trips pretty much needs to measure up to whatever their yardstick is that they're using to make those decisions. The only advice I have for an advantage player looking for ways to do this on the cheap, and aren't we all, is I have to recommend another book by one of your other associates, Max Rubin. Comp City is an absolutely great read for these kinds of things, ways to kind of inflate your expected loss in the eyes of the casino in ways that won't cost you very much money to do. So there's a real cat and mouse aspect to that part of the game, much like there is with blackjack card counting.
Very good. Now, let's say hypothetically that you, me, and Munchkin all respected each other as approximately equivalent tournament players. Now, this is a contrary to fact assumption as it relates to me specifically. I'm a total novice at tournaments, but go with me for insofar as the question. How likely would it be in one of these, say, big invitational tournaments with a $300,000 prize pool that we would take parts of each other's action, so that if either you two, if any of the three of us won, then we all win? Is that in Vegas? There appear to be people who do that. Is that common?
It is commonplace. Obviously, you need to be in a situation with people you can trust, because there's a lot of money involved. If one of your affiliates wins the event, you need to be able to rely on that person to divvy up the funds as agreed beforehand. Deals can extend from anything from what we would call a save, where we say, if any of us wins first place, we'll hand over $2,000 in cash to each of the others, or something which is a straight percentage split, or anything in between, really. These deals are common, but often frowned upon by the casino for various reasons. They tend to cause problems, primarily. And actually, I'm probably seeing less of that now than I did a few years back. It just depends on how many people you know that are at the final table. These invitational events are frequently vastly, most of the attendees are not wise guys. They're just big players in the casino, and those guys are less likely to be even entertaining the idea of making any kind of a deal. So in those level events,
that must have changed. I haven't played any of these invitationals in quite a number of years, but back 6-7 years ago, there were professional teams that were playing these things, and especially if it was a game like craps or baccarat, where members of their team could be betting on opposite sides of each other, it was really hard to have a chance to win against them, because
yes,
they
indeed.
can just swing you.
Blackjack doesn't
no
have that
what,
to the extent, but as you point out, craps and baccarat particularly, you can have two affiliated players who merely make opposite bets. One bets on the pass line and one bets on the don't pass, and if they're both all in, one or the other of those two players is going to end up with that large stack of chips. One of them is doubling up, and the other one's going to be out of chips and out of the event. Now, you can debate whether it's tougher to compete against one opponent with double the starting bankroll versus two opponents with a regular starting bankroll, but there's no question that kind of manipulation goes on a lot, particularly in the craps and baccarat events. The teams, a lot of the teams have absolutely been decimated from getting these invites. The casinos, in many cases, have figured out who some of these participants are, and they're just not getting the invites anymore. But it does still go on. Yes, I shouldn't dismiss that out of hand, because it's certainly still very prevalent.
Yeah.
So this type of collusion, you say, is common in some tournaments. Is it basically not very common in blackjack tournaments?
It's far less common because it's more difficult to directly manipulate the chip stacks. In blackjack, you end up with some really subtle manipulations that can go on and that raise all sorts of ethical issues. In fact, over the last few years, I have done very few substantial deals because I was uncomfortable with some of the moral decisions I was ending up having to make at the table. An example of the kind of subtleties that can come into play, the position of the bet button in blackjack is very important. The starting bet and the play of the hands rotates around the table. And if you have an associate at the table with you, you can either make your last chance all-in bet a hand early or a hand late, and it might manipulate where the button falls for your friend. And is that an ethical thing to do? Kind of tough to say.
Doesn't sound tough at all for me to say. Doesn't sound ethical at all.
I would tend to agree with you, Bob, and I have aggravated many friends by saying, nope, I'm just not making a deal with you. I'm uncomfortable with it. So, but it certainly goes on.
I'd like to talk about, we have so much to talk about, so I want to talk about these strategy cards that you came out with. So can you tell us about those?
You mentioned in the intro that you get the emails occasionally of, when do I split sevens? Well, hey, you've got nothing on me. I get a ton of these.
Yeah.
I've had a popular blackjack website since 1998, so I have delivered a lot of strategy advice over those years, including free strategy charts.
Actually, I do want to plug that site. Your site is blackjackinfo.com, and this really is one of the very best blackjack sites on the web. It's got a basic strategy engine where you can go plug in any set of rules, and it'll give you a basic strategy chart for that set of rules, that number of decks. And it's got a really great free online class to teach you how to count cards. So yeah, it's just and it used to have probably the most popular forum until you decided that was not worth the hassles that involved in running a blackjack forum. But
yes,
anyway, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, thanks for the plug there. And yes, to dismiss any of the conspiracy theories that I still hear about why I shut down the message boards. Hey, I just got tired of dealing with all the headaches. The advantaged blackjack player community is a pretty abrasive lot as a group, and the headaches just finally overwhelmed my willingness to put up with it. So I'm actually quite happy with the site without the interactive message board. There's a great archive that still exists there. The strategy cards arose as a direct spinoff of the site's basic strategy engine. It was apparent that I was getting a lot of traffic of people who were interested in the appropriate blackjack basic strategy for specific rules. And so I came out with a set of strategy cards tailored to the 6 most common sets of rules that they would find. And that product's been out for a number of years now. What I introduced this year that is new is a larger version of those cards, which also includes information about card counting index numbers. And this is a concept where a card counter knows something about the composition of the remaining cards to be dealt, and they can change how they play certain hands to improve their overall results. So I don't think anyone's done this before. This was a pretty new product, and I'm pretty pleased with them. They've been selling well, and I've gotten a lot of nice comments from players who are using them.
Yeah, and it's all based on the high-low, right? Yes. That's the only count that it covers.
That's correct. Although there are many, many different card counting systems, the most popular one remains something called the high-low or plus-minus count. This is a count that values the low cards 2 through 6 at +1 and 10s and aces is -1. And all of the index numbers on my cards are for that particular counting system.
So I'm looking at one of these strategy cards now. They're very well done, high quality plastic, and basically I struggle to read the index numbers
because you're old, Bob.
Yeah. And
Bob and I probably see those at about the same resolution, I would guess.
Now,
yes,
it would seem the next time you do it, so like I'm looking at one, and so like all the D's for double are in yellow, and there's little numbers underneath it for when you don't. And so it would seem like you're doing it backwards. So you don't need to put big D's in every one of those boxes because that big D means double. But if you didn't have the D there, you could put the -1 or -3 or -4 or some other number so that you could read it from table. By the time, one of the things I had with my strategy cards, I found it by the time people had enough bankroll to go into a casino, their eyes are shut. So
good observation.
So you can use these at home to practice with, and there you can have magnifying glasses and stuff like that. But in a casino, if you're older than about 12, these are tough.
I would agree with you. I actually struggled with the decision of how to produce these cards, and I did want to make them at least possible to use in the actual casino environment. And I was concerned that something that was quite obviously a list of card counting index numbers would be, potentially dangerous to sit there and look at in the casino. So these look very much like regular basic strategy cards.
Yes, they do. The kind you get in gift shops.
Indeed. There were two versions of each card that are in that set. One has the index numbers in painfully small print, as Bob has pointed out, and the other uses a series of these black dots located around the perimeter of each decision square. And the location of the black dot is a coding system for what the index number for that is. Frankly, after producing these, I find the black dot version, the stealth version I call them, to be better as far as learning and remembering the indexes, because it's kind of a visual thing. It's less memorization. It's more of a visual memory cue. So those were some of the decisions that went into the design there.
And the black dots, which I would think of as little black squares, are much easier to see. And
I agree.
And once you learn the code as to where on the upper side it means this, and on the lower side it means that, and on that. So I don't have the code down. I'm assuming it's in here somewhere.
It is in the documentation there.
I believe that.
I'll point out what the main idea behind these cards was. Many people, even proficient card counters, they'll get a set of index numbers from a published book of some sort and rely on those numbers. Now, as the rules of the game change, the value of these index numbers also changes, and finding good, solid, reliable, accurately calculated index numbers for various rules is a lot tougher than it sounds. You really, the best players generate all these numbers for their specific situations using software. But what I wanted to do was create accurate index numbers for a common range of rules, and that's why this particular set of cards, you get 12 cards for six different sets of rules, and the index numbers are something I absolutely slaved over for a couple of months solid. These are good numbers.
Mm.
All right.
I wanted to move on to some of your actual playing.
Okay.
Because players always have good stories. So you have a story about winning $100,000 on a single hand?
I do. This was kind of a neat opportunity that arose in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina destroyed most of the casinos along the Gulfport and Biloxi area, Gulf Coast, and it was roughly a year before they began to reopen. One of the properties that reopened there, Grand Casino, had a property in the city of Gulfport and an additional Grand Casino in the city of Biloxi. After the storm destroyed both, they decided to open back only the Biloxi property. And when they reopened, they at the same time decided to retire one of their table games, the Caribbean Stud game. Now, Caribbean Stud was a fairly boring game that became popular only because it had a $1 side bet for a very large progressive. You were dealt a 5-card poker hand, and if you were dealt a royal flush in your 5 cards, you won this relatively large jackpot. By 2006, when this was going on, the game had lost most of its popularity. People had moved on to 3-card poker and other things. So they were retiring the game from those casinos. But they had to get
It was the
money.
very first carnival game, and
It was the
so
very
yeah,
first
that
carnival,
that was
exactly.
really the only popularity was it was the only game in town for people who wanted
I
a
guess
carnival
that was
game.
it. It
so.
was
But
pretty
you're
boring
right,
to
it's a
play.
boring game.
It's a boring game. What happened in this case, they've got this money from the progressive jackpots from both the Gulfport property and the Biloxi property, and that belongs to the players, not the casino. So they need to give that money away before they can close the table. So they changed the rules to give this money away. Instead of having to be dealt a royal flush in your 5 cards, which is a 649,000 to 1 shot, they changed the rules, and all it took was a 4 of a kind or better. And a 4 of a kind, a straight flush, or a royal brings the odds to under 4,000 to 1 against.
Wow.
So, sensing opportunity, I loaded up some friends, and off we went. We arrived.
But still, 4,000 to 1 when you're playing 20 hands an hour, it's going to take a while.
We locked up as many seats as we could at the table. We arrived, and we actually succeeded in getting every seat at the table except one holdout, a woman who was there and was camped out just as we were planning to. The casino, knowing that they had a captive audience, had raised the minimum bet to $25. So we're risking $25 on ante, and if you chose to not fold, you had to put up another $25, plus the dollar side bet. They still wanted to collect that. And so we settled in for the long haul, figuring we're going to be here a while. We played for, I think it was 16 hours on the first jackpot. They started with the Gulfport jackpot on the game, which was around $80,000. And after 16 hours, the one spot that we didn't have locked up is who got the 4 of a kind. And
Oh, my
so
God.
The woman left with $80,000, and we were all disgusted and extremely tired of playing this stupid game. And we went home to rest for a while. Went to sleep. After waking up, I'm thinking, hey, there's another jackpot down there. This one's in the high 90,000 range for the Biloxi jackpot. I wonder if we could get seats. Back we all went, and surprisingly, I guess the process of attrition was working in our favor. Many of the locals just didn't have deep enough pockets to survive the $50 a hand. That the Caribbean stuff's kind of a brutal game actually. And so they were after about an hour or two, we actually had all the seats but one locked up again. And fortunately, 8 hours into the process, I was still pretty tired and bleary-eyed. I picked my hand up and looked, and I had 3 deuces. And I thought, great, I probably didn't lose this hand. And I really wasn't even thinking of the 4 of a kind when I peeled off the last card, and the case deuce in the deck was staring at me. The jackpot on the game had just crossed the $100,000 mark. So it was $100,000 in change, literally, that I picked up for one hand of cards that day. It was a pretty exciting hand. After we divvied the money up between all of my associates there, it actually wasn't one of my bigger wins. I think I netted under $20,000 for the day, but boy, it was a sweet win.
Yeah, it's hard just to make it when you only can make 20,000 in a day.
But that kind of boring. I mean, that's the kind of those boring plays. It's very much like playing a progressive slot or something, where you're just there for hours and hours and hours going,
exactly.
Oh, I wish this was over.
Until finally it is, and then everyone's got a big smile on their face.
Right.
Now, your books have very similar titles, and both books are primarily previously published material. So my question is, how are the books different from each other, and how much is new in the books?
What happened is my publisher, Henry Tamburan, came to me with this idea of gathering my writings over a number of years together and publishing them as an ebook. And I was hesitant and didn't really like his idea until he started actually pulling together a list of some of the articles, and I started looking at them and thinking, well, there's a lot of good stuff here. But I was convinced that I wanted there to be something new for the players who had followed my writings all along. They definitely needed something unique in the book. So I wrote 3 new, completely new pieces for each of the 2 books, and those have not appeared anywhere in print or on my website or anything. And those are I put a lot of effort into those. Total of 6 brand new content for those books. As far as why there are 2 books and they are named very similarly, We did the first book, and about a year or two later realized that there was an equivalent amount of material that had accrued, and we released the second. Very, very similar concept, but the articles are all unique between the two books.
So if somebody wants to get them, and they're an advantage player, and they want the cheapest price possible.
Well, they're guaranteed to get the cheapest price possible because they are available in only one place, and that is the website of Henry Tamburin, the publisher. Although I have an e-commerce store at my site, it's never been set up to do the digital downloads or emailing of e-books, so I sell it through his site instead. I will. Easiest way to get to that for your listeners is through my website at blackjackinfo. I have put together a page just for listeners to your show, and they can arrive at that page. The page is blackjackinfo.com/GWAE, and that's for Gambling with an Edge. That's blackjackinfo.com/GWAE, and they from there can link to the directly to the ebook store and buy either the books individually, or there's a package price for both of them.
And you can get the cards on that site too? Is that the place to get the cards? Or
Yes, indeed. Everything we've talked about tonight will be available from that page. There's also going to be something I put together about a method of improving your results with casino marketing mail. Just a quick tip that I think could be quite valuable to some of your listeners who may be missing out on some of the things they could be getting from the casinos they play at.
Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to wait and have them go to your site to do that?
That's up to you. We can touch on that if you like.
We have about 6 minutes before we need to go to a commercial break. So what can you tell us in 6 minutes or less?
Let's see. Let's do another story, perhaps.
Okay.
Here's one.
If we're going to do another story, I have to ask you, because a number of friends of mine played a recent 2-to-1 on Blackjack promo that I think you must have got to first, because none of them lasted very long. So I think you must have been there early because you had quite a win, right?
Absolutely. One of your guests a few weeks back mentioned this very promo, and he had a little trouble when he and a friend from Las Vegas appeared on site and tried to play, and were promptly shown the door. And the reason was I'm afraid I had already poisoned the well, as it were. I learned about a promotion in Oklahoma. Oklahoma casinos have an interesting scenario where they generally make their money from antes paid for each hand, and any of the money they actually win from the on the house playing as blackjack, they generally have to give that back in promotions and drawings and that sort of thing. This particular Oklahoma casino decided they were going to give the money back by paying 2-to-1 on blackjack with max bets up to $500. And you can bet 2 spots. So
wait, did you say 500?
$500 a spot, and we were allowed to bet 2 spots each. So
this must have been a different place, because the one where my people were playing, it was only 300.
Well,
unless they lowered it.
I think they lowered it after we were there. It started out at 500. And so I went in with 2 friends, one a full partner in the venture and one who was some hired help for the day. And we were spreading 2 spots of $500. We played all day long. Our expectation that day was to win roughly $1,000 an hour per person. And we did substantially better than that. I'm not sure how many hours we played, but we ended up with a $78,000 win over the course of the day.
Even split 3 ways is not terrible.
Yeah, split 2 ways plus paying some help. It worked out quite well. It was a pretty nice day. What really made the story interesting for us, though, was what happened at the end of the night. We had no indication that we were not going to be able to come back and continue to play the following day. But they were really skittish about us leaving with the chips, and they told us that we couldn't leave the property with all the chips we had. We needed to cash them in. This is like, 2 a.m. in the morning in a very small casino in a very desolate area, and we're standing at the cashier's cage with roughly $100,000 in chips being counted out by a very nervous cashier. And the entire population inside the casino are standing around and watching this.
I'll bet.
And
Must-see TV.
Absolutely. And then, so we've got to take all this cash, stuff it into the various cargo pants pockets that we've got, and walk out the front door with it into an absolutely dark part of Oklahoma and get into a car and drive away. We made circles, and we took a very circuitous route to our hotel for the night. We were so afraid that someone was going to follow us and rob us, but we managed to get out of there fine.
You didn't consider taking a check?
I'm not sure that was an option. I don't remember exactly how that all played out, but no, I don't think it was offered, and I'm not sure how that was going to. We were planning to come back and play the following day. We showed up and were no longer welcome to play.
Go figure.
The promotion actually ran for an entire month, but if they didn't know you as a local, you were not going to bet more than about $25, and that's what the crew from Vegas found out when they drove in the following week. But it was a nice win, and we got a great story out of it as well.
Oh.
Very good. So we got a couple more questions for you, Ken. We're going to do some commercials first, pay some bills, but then we're going to, but don't go away. We got some more stuff for you.
I'll hang on.
Thank you. The South Point has more than 10,000 games returning more than 99%. That's more than anyone else has. Every Thursday is Senior Slot Tournament Day, where $5,200 is given away each week. All seniors get one free entry, and up to two more may be earned with a modest amount of play. They had a 2 times point day yesterday. Thank you very much, January 1st. And they'll be having another one on Martin Luther King Day, Monday, January 20th. Midnight to midnight, no limits on points. The next semester of free video poker classes at the South Point will begin Wednesday, February 5th, and will continue for 10 weeks. I'll give you the exact schedule as we get closer. One of the curious things is when I was making out my schedule of classes, since last year was on Tuesday and February 5th was on a Tuesday, I'm using exactly the same dates for last year as I did this year. Hopefully I didn't make a date mistake last year because it's going to be transferred over. All right, at the Palms, they've completely reformatted the weekend drawings. It used to be Friday and Saturday nights at 8 o'clock. Now it is Friday only at 7:30. And a bigger change is there's now a maximum of 100 drawing tickets each day, whereas previously it was unlimited. Now 100 tickets is not a trivial amount. If you were playing on a video poker on a game which had nickels or dimes as the lowest denomination, that's still $10,000 a play. If you were playing a machine where quarters were the lowest denomination, that's $25,000 a play. So there's going to be players who don't make that much, but those of us who are willing to play a couple $100,000 and buy the wins in the drawing are no longer able to do this. So this now turns the drawing into low roller events. So if you're willing to play every day, nobody's going to have more tickets than you. So this increases your chances. Friday and Saturday, you still get 5 times drawing tickets, 8 p.m. to midnight. Play, Earn, and Win, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. From January 6th to 17th, they'll have a theme of warm and toasty. The top prize is $200 worth of Lowe's gift cards a day, and your points may be used over multiple days. From January 20th to 31st, you can earn up to $200 in free slot play daily. As always, you keep your points, even if you redeem the gift cards or free play. Every Thursday, there's now a senior drawing at 4 p.m. based on your play Thursday only. 5 prizes totaling a total $900 are awarded. There's a limit of 100 tickets per person in these drawings. At videopoker.com, this remains the place to practice a wide variety of games, including Quick Quads, Ultimate X, Extra Draw Frenzy Poker, Hyper Bonus, lots of others. Often these games are the best returning games in a casino, and you need to practice to make sure you know how to play. They have daily contests. Today's free daily contest is Quick Quads. Over the next few days, you'll find Wheel Poker, Ultimate 4-of-a-kind Bonus, Super Triple Tape Poker. The last week of the month, they'll have a larger tournament. with one of their games. They haven't announced what the game is yet, but it will take place between January 24th and the end of the month. All right. So since Ken didn't go away, we have another question for him. Now, there's a large variety of tournament formats tried over the years. You mentioned earlier Ultimate Blackjack Tour. They had a legitimate format, even if the organization itself ran into problems. Now, your book discusses some of the differences in strategies for the various formats. How important is it to study the older formats, which are not currently in vogue?
I'm of mixed opinion there. I think there's some value in the ideas around some of the more exotic formats, but unless you're actually playing events that have similar rules, I'm not sure there's a lot of value in studying those. Actually, after the elimination blackjack format was introduced, there are some places around the country that are still playing events that have elimination hands, and so all that is still very relevant in those few areas. There are also some tournaments that are still using the concept of a powered chip, which originated with the World Series of Blackjack shows. So some of those things exist, but unless you're definitely going to be playing in those particular events, it's probably not worth spending a lot of mental effort to learn about them.
Were I in your shoes, I would actually give a different answer. Simply that in video poker tournaments, there's different kinds of rule structures, and unless you're at least familiar with the various types of rule structures, when you read the rules at whatever tournament you're going to play, you'll miss things unless you're familiar with that kind of tournament. So you need to study these various formats so that if you do come across some rules, you just goes, oh yeah, that's what this is, or oh yeah, that's what that is. If you don't have that depth, you're just not going to be able to handle the new one.
Actually, that brings up an important point. One of the chapters in your book is about how important it is to study the rules of the tournament you're playing in, which, boy, is really true, because sometimes there are things buried in those rules that can really make a difference. And you gave an example of one where it didn't make a difference, but it could have made a huge difference just because
Absolutely.
you knew the rule that the other people didn't know.
Nobody ever reads the rules at these events. So
you have a minute and a half to explain this to us. Go ahead.
It's actually pretty common to have some oddball clause in the rules that can potentially swing a match one way or the other, and knowing that stuff can be very valuable. I can't think of anything more mundane than sitting there reading the fine print of rules of a tournament, but it has paid great dividends in my playing history for sure. So definitely a simple thing to do and well worth the effort.
I actually won a tournament once because I hadn't read the rules, but on the last hand, I just picked up all my chips and hid them in my hand. And a player betting after me said, "Hey, let me see your chips." And I said to the boss, "Is that in the rules? Do I have to show my chips?" And the boss said no. And she lost the tournament because she wasn't able to count me down, and she was pissed. She was one of Wong's tournament team. And to this day, she still, that happened 30 some years ago. And to this day, she still, mentions it when we talk.
Well, it's interesting. Now we have about 20 seconds left. Are there any times where the casinos change rules enough that you just walk home, just go home without even playing because the rules aren't what they promised?
It's happened a few times. Fortunately, very few. Most common are situations where the casino
Sorry to set you up. We're actually out of time. Good night, everybody. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes. Thank you, Ken.
You've been listening to Gambling with an Edge with your hosts, Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin. Subscribe to the show in iTunes, and episodes will be delivered to you automatically every week. Archived versions of past shows may be found at bobdancer.com and richardmunchkin.com. We welcome emails at gamblingwithanedge@gmail.com. Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin are both available on Facebook and welcome your questions. The sponsors for the show are the South Point Hotel, Casino and Spa, the M Resort, the Palms Casino Resort, and the website videopoker.com. Join us again next week for another Gambling with an Edge.